baby, so I knew I
Ready?
had done something.
All right, good morning, everybody. As I was telling the in-person group that last week's lesson did not record, so don't try to look for it because it's not there. But I did get Thyatira up there, and so if you want to watch that one, you can. And I noticed that there are people going out there and viewing it, so I appreciate that, and I hope you're getting something out of it. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to email me. And that goes for the people here as well. You can do it too if you want. All right, so we didn't finish Sardis last week, and so there's a couple things I did want to close in on, go back to, and as we do that, this week we're going to be doing the church at Philadelphia, and we're just about done with the churches, and you would think that doing the churches might be the easiest part of Revelation, and to a certain extent it kind of is, because after this it gets wild and crazy. So, but as you can see, the Philadelphia is the sixth one, and it was, you can see where it's on the map there. Let's see if I can. This is where Philadelphia is right here, okay? So we've gone in this arc like this and stopped right there. And it was a frontier community, and we'll get some information on that in just a second. But I just wanted to see where we were. On the timeline, we've already moved, we're moving from the bottom up. And Philadelphia is going to be the church age that's associated really from 1790 to today. It really didn't end at 1900, though there are groups, I should say, there are groups that believe it was a period from 1790 to 1900, and then 1900 on will be Laodicea. But a lot of the charts that you see will show that Philadelphia still goes on into today, and you'll see why that would be in a minute. And actually, all the churches are represented by the modern church, just in some form or fashion, but in terms of the church age. All right. So as you can see, we've gone through all these churches today. We're going to be doing Philadelphia, which is the heart, and we've only got one more to go, and then we move on to, like I said, the wild and crazy stuff. Now, the reason I put the one section there in highlighted it is because those are the churches that to a certain extent still are impacting the church, the modern church today, and that starts with Thyatira, okay? And as we went through and did those churches, we saw some stuff that were like, okay, we can see where this would be. Thyatira was the Catholic Church, the start of the state church, which is still in existence and still very powerful, more powerful than we probably even realize. What's the guy's name that wrote the Brown? What's his first name? Guy that wrote Tom Hanks was in all three of the movies. The Da Vinci Code, yeah. And one of the things that he has through his line is how powerful the church is. Yeah. And he's just getting the tip of the iceberg. I mean, it's just amazing how powerful they are. But anyway, and the Reformation, which is Reformation for Protestant churches. And as we said last week, I think one of the things that has really hurt the church, or I shouldn't say, which hurt Christianity, is the institutionalization of Christianity. Because once you join once you have these institutions, then you have to follow their line if you want to be active. I mean, there are churches, and you all know this, there are denominations where if you don't do A, B, C, D, you can't serve in the church. Period. You can't teach children's class. You can't do anything until you do all these things. I remember Southern Baptist Church. It didn't matter if you've been baptized 20 times. If you joined a church, you had to be baptized in that church to be a member of that church. So anyway, so we can see that both, a lot of times it's easy for us as Christians, as Protestants, to, and I use Protestants in a very broad brush, to point fingers at the Catholic Church and say, oh, they're pagan, they're this, that, and the other thing. But when you compare what's in the Catholic Church with some of the stuff that's in there's a lot of similarity. We've continued on some of the stuff that we pointed at the Catholic Church and said, they did this wrong, but we're going to do it anyway. And so we have our own crosses to bear, if you will. We're not above reproach. All right, so we talked about the church at Ephesus. That was the first one. And the point there was that we need to be devoted to service, not just doctrine. And when we talked about that, I said, that's my biggest issue for me personally, is I love getting into looking up the words and looking at the history, and I get all excited about doing that. And I struggle with being putting it into action. Smyrna Church is enduring persecution. This idea that we as Christians, we are going to, if we're living like we're supposed to be living, if we're acting the way we're supposed to be acting, we're going to be persecuted. I mean, and none of us are Jesus. Jesus was perfect, and he was persecuted. So how can we expect to be a Christian and not be persecuted? And we have this idea, I think a lot of this comes from televangelists, where Christianity is not a life of persecution and sacrifice. It's a life of wealth and prosperity, and that's just not scriptural. Pergamum was to stand fast versus the world. We are, and I think, it's interesting. It's easy, when I look at the world today, I go, oh my gosh, how are my kids ever going to survive this?
Yes.
And then but I think back when I was in high school, and my parents saying the exact same thing about the world I was growing up in, and I'm like, I was the frog in the boiling water. It's like, what? Some girls are wearing miniskirts. Well, so what? Or this music's not bad. There's nothing wrong with it. Of course, rock music back then, there was stuff, but mild compared to what it is today. I remember, I'm sure none of you remember this, but there was a song that was put out by Nancy Sinatra, and I can't remember the guy's name. No, not that one. Not that one. Not the Boots one. It was another song, and it was entitled "The Rebel," and it was about Jesus. And the Catholic Church got so upset that this song was on the radio, they got it removed. This was back in the 60s. That's mild compared to what they're out there today, and nobody's doing. When Frankie Valli sang "Swearing to God," the Catholic Church got all upset about that because he was swearing. So anyway, we've gone down this slippery slope, and it's just going to get slipperier as we keep going. So anyway, Thyatira, there was pagan practices, and this again represented the Catholic, the state church, the first state church, bringing in the pagan rituals and giving them a Christian facade. And then Sardis last week was being watchful and diligent in what we are doing. Be prepared. Do not be caught unawares. Okay? And then Philadelphia we'll talk about today. All right. So then we talked about Sardis. The goddess of Sardis was Cybele, and Cybele had the power to do what? You remember? She had the power of resurrection. She could die and come back to life. Kind of interesting. This is kind of this 2 Timothy 3 kind of covers what it is that we're dealing with here in these last 2 or 3 churches. And it speaks to what we're going through today. So I wanted to go and include this. You may not be able to read it, and that's fine, but it's 2 Timothy 3, verses 1 through 5. But realize this, that in the last days, difficult times will come. For people will be lovers of self, lovers of money, boastful, arrogant, slanderers, disobedient to parents, ungrateful, unholy, unloving, irreconcilable, malicious gossips, without self-control, brutal, haters of good, treacherous, reckless, conceited, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, holding to a form of godliness, although they have denied its power. Avoid such people as these. And my thinking is, when he says holding to a form of godliness, that he's talking about Christians as much as he is non-Christians, believers as opposed to non-believers. This list is pretty extensive. I don't think there's anything you could add to this list. And the word there, verse 3, it says unloving, and I don't know, depends on what translation you have, but that word unloving is, in the Greek is estorgoi, and it basically means, how do I put this? Sexual perversion. So, I mean, we're talking about all the homosexual stuff and the pedophilia stuff and transgender stuff. And this is back before 100 AD he's writing this stuff. Now, they had some of this stuff going. They couldn't do the surgeries back then. But this stuff's been around since man has been sinners. But it just wasn't as well, let me not say that. I think when Christianity became more popular, it was pushed down, and because the Roman Empire, this stuff was going on in the Roman Empire. I mean, it very, very rampant. I've told you about the vomitorium, didn't I?
No, after we ate this cake.
It had nothing to do with cake. Okay. Well, if you want to know, you have to see me after class. My wife has a gentle stomach. Okay, so what does a Sardis church look like? And so a Sardis church would be a church where the Bible is really nothing more than a prop for a 5-point sermon. Okay, you're not teaching the Bible, preaching the Bible. Now, does that mean you can never do that? No. But there are churches that's all they ever do. They have a social gospel that they want to say, and then they come up with verses to kind of support those ideas. In many seminaries, the question is the focus on the Bible or learning how to do church, run staff, and defend doctrines? And I think anytime you go to a seminary that is supported by a specific religious group, you're going to get how to defend your doctrine. I mean, that's just a part of it. Is the pastor a teacher, or is he a church CEO? There are a lot of big churches where the preacher is really a CEO. He's running this organization. Instead of the word, we have oratory, humor, drama, and elaborate music programs. And we need to think about that in terms of what is it that, and I'm not saying, again, I'm not talking about this church, I'm talking about the church, the Christian church. What is it that we're in this movement to do? We're trying to attract non-church people through these music programs, light shows going on, or we're doing you get preachers who have a good humor. They make you laugh, make you feel good when you walk out, and the focus is on giving a enjoyable experience as opposed to preaching the gospel, preaching the Bible. Okay, and then the congregation bears responsibility to discern. The pastor has responsibility in what it is that he's doing in terms of leading the congregation. But we as believers, as a congregation, have a responsibility to also be aware of what's going on and question it when it doesn't jive with the Bible. And we don't always do that. I guess we tend to kind of assume that because we're just the congregation that we don't really know. So I must be wrong. But that's why we have to be in the Word, so we know. All right, so here's kind of what's happened to the Christian church during the Sardis period. If you want to look at the church age as being labeled Sardis and that time period, you can see that, I don't know how well it shows up on there. Oh, pretty good. The blue line here is since 1972 that almost every group has either plateaued off or dropped, and the biggest one has been mainline Protestants, which would be, your Presbyterians, your Baptists, the mainline ones. So we're not seeing a whole lot of movement, yet the population continues to increase. All right?
Hey Greg, what's the light blue one that seems to be climbing?
That is the nun.
Oh.
Yes, they're called nuns. And I was like, what are you talking about, nuns? What nuns? I thought he was talking about N-U-N-S, but he's talking about N-O-N-E-S. The nuns, the people who don't go to church at all, have no affiliation whatsoever, and you can see that that's the only one that has really blown up. Which means you have a lot of people that are leaving the church. It no longer has any value to them. It's not meeting their needs, all right? So let's look at another one. Here's a world map of Christianity. And the stuff that is in the orange are all decreases. The ones that are in blue are all increases. There's only 3 places in the world where the Christian population, those claiming to be Christians, has decreased. Europe, America, and Australia. Everywhere else in the world, Christianity is blowing up. Mark Harrell, I don't know when that video was done, but he said in his video that 6 million Muslims are saved every day.
Gosh.
That tells you how many Muslims there are in the world. But 6 million a day.
Wow.
No, I take that back. Maybe it's a year. 6 million a year. 6 million.
Oh, damn.
Okay, I'm
Yeah, 'cause
sorry,
I
I
was
made
thinking
a
about the whole
mistake.
population. I was like, it's like,
Well, but they just,
We know.
I wish it was
Because
so
of
big.
different
it's 6 million a year, sorry. But
Still, that's a lot.
it's a lot. That's a lot, and especially when you consider that there are not a lot of Christian missionaries allowed in Muslim areas.
Right.
And we've talked about how many have told stories about Jesus visiting them at night in a dream, and that's how they became a believer, was that Jesus actually visited. And it's more than one story; it's a number of them. So we can see that it's just in the decline, and we're probably at a point where we can pretty honestly say the United States is not a Christian country. I mean, it's pretty.
Because we let all the Muslims in.
Well, even before that, we had the. There was a time in our history when it was socially prudent to be seen going to church, regardless of whether you were actually a Christian or not. It was just something that you did. It's all families did. The average American family, they got up and went to church and Sunday school on Sunday morning. Whatever they did the rest of the week didn't make any difference. And I think what's happening is that, so we had a lot of, for lack of a better term, wolves in sheep's clothing. Might have had some wolves in sheep's clothing too, or the way around. Anyway, there were people that were there that really weren't there. They were doing it because it looked good in the neighborhood. You see these pictures of the family walking hand in hand to church, walking in the bell going ding dong, coming to church. And now you can't hear church. They don't do bells anymore because neighborhoods have complained about it. They're waking them up or whatever. Remember when Prestonwood, they used to have a bell that would go off at like 11 o'clock to let you know the service was starting, and the neighborhood complained to the city that they were waking them up and blah 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 blah. So they stopped doing it. But anyway, so that's kind of where we are. This is the Sardis church. This is the impact of the Sardis church. Period. Is that we've kind of lost that missionaries. And what's interesting is that we have other countries like Africa sending missionaries to the United States.
Yes.
That's just a mind bender to me, But apparently they see the need. And then there's 52,000 defections each week from churchdom, and astounding 94% are leaders. And this is a few years back. So anyway, that's the state that we're in right now. We've got some problems, and I don't know necessarily what the answer is. I think we just need to get back to the Bible. But anyway, so we're looking at the church in Philadelphia. Everybody knows what the term Philadelphia means, right? Brotherly love. So this is the original city of brotherly love, and actually, it got its name because the emperor had a brother that he just loved dearly. And when the city was established, That's why he called it Philadelphia, because he loved his brother so much. I guess he didn't want to name it Bob, but Philadelphia sounded better. All right, so verse 7. And to the angel, and we're in chapter 3. And to the angel of the church in Philadelphia write, he who is holy, who is true, who has the key of David, who opens and no one will shut, and who shuts and no one opens, says this, I know your deeds. Behold, I have put before you an open door which no one can shut, because you have a little power, and have followed my word, and have not denied my name. Behold, I will make those of the synagogue of Satan, who say that they are Jews and are not, but lie. I will make them come and bow down before your feet, and make them know that I have loved you. Because you have kept my word of perseverance, I also will keep you from the hour of the testing, that hour which is about to come upon the whole world, to test those who live on the earth. I am coming quickly. Hold firmly to what you have, so that no one will take your crown. The one who overcomes, I will make him a pillar in the temple of my God, and he will not go out from it anymore. And I will write on him the name of my God, and the name of the city of my God, the new Jerusalem, which comes down out of heaven from my God, and my new name. The one who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. Okay. All right. So this is the era of the missionary church. And when you think about the missionary movement in the United States, it began about the beginning of the 1900s. I mean, there were missionaries before, but there was really a big push in the denominations to get missionaries out into the world. So, and this goes from 1750 to the rapture. So that's where we are right now, if going by this. Okay. So let's see if this works. Of course it did. It did yesterday. That's weird. Hold on a second. Yay. You're kidding me. That is weird.
YouTube at its finest.
It's just wrong.
This is like where you edit it. It's working where you edit it, but not where you play it. Theoretically.
Of Revelation, we are told of 7 letters Jesus wrote to churches in what was then Asia Minor, an area now known as the country of Turkey. The 6th of these letters was addressed to the city of Philadelphia. Located 28 miles southeast of Sardis, this city was a border town, sitting at the borders of 3 countries. The road from Europe to the east.
Oh,
Oh, sorry.
all right. No, it looks like it says my browser won't support it.
We're good, just let play.
It's okay. Now it's just like gone all over the place.
It's just at the end. I think you just.
Oh, I
have
just
to
hit to the end.
Wrote to churches in what was then Asia Minor, an area now
It
known
worked
as
last
the
night.
country of Turkey. The 6th of these letters was addressed to the city of Philadelphia. Located 28 miles southeast of Sardis, this city was a border town, sitting at the borders of 3 countries. The road from Europe to the east came through Philadelphia, making it the gateway from one continent to another. This city was founded by King Attalus of Pergamum, who loved his brother so much that he was called Philadelphos,
I told you.
which means one who loves his brother. It was after him that the city was named. Because of its geography, the city of Philadelphia was founded as a doorway of opportunity to spread the Greek culture and language to lands of the east. It did so well in its task that by 19 AD, one of its neighboring countries had forgotten their own language and were all but Greeks. This also gave the church a strategic opportunity to fulfill God's mission for them, to be an open door to spread the gospel to the surrounding area. Philadelphia was built on the edge of a great volcanic area, which brought it great prosperity because it was one of the most fertile areas in the world. It was a great grape growing area, and Philadelphia was world famous for its vintages and its wines. It was also known for its hot springs, which brought many people to the city to bathe in its medicinal waters. But that which brought prosperity to Philadelphia also brought danger. Because it was built near a volcanic area, the city was in constant danger of earthquakes. One earthquake, 17 AD, was so powerful that it destroyed Sardis and 10 other cities, including Philadelphia. The aftershocks continued in Philadelphia for years, causing many to live in constant fear. Tiberius, the Roman emperor, was generous to the city and contributed to its rebuilding. In gratitude, the residents temporarily changed the name of the city to Neo Caesarea, which means the new city of Caesar. Therefore, the people of the city knew what it meant to receive a new name. To the Christians in this city, Jesus promised to give his name for their faithfulness in serving him, even in a land filled with worship of the Greek gods. It was to this church that Jesus wrote a letter filled with hope and encouragement. To the angel of the church in Philadelphia write, these are the words of him who is holy and true, who holds the key of David. What he opens, no one can shut, and what he shuts, no one can open. I know your deeds. See, I have placed before you an open door that no one can shut. I know that you have little strength, yet you have kept my word and have not denied my name. I will make those who are of the synagogue of Satan, who claim to be Jews, though they are not, but are liars. I will make them come and fall down at your feet and acknowledge that I have loved you. Since you have kept my command to endure patiently, I will also keep you from the hour of trial that is going to come upon the whole world to test those who live on the earth. I am coming soon. Hold on to what you have so that no one will take your crown. Him who overcomes, I will make a pillar in the temple of my God. Never again will he leave it. I will write on him the name of my God and the name of the city of my God, the new Jerusalem, which is coming down out of heaven from my God. And I will also write on him my new name. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches.
Okay. So, what's kind of interesting about all this is that as you're hearing the history, it's just like all the other churches, when you're hearing the history of the city, it fits what the scripture is talking.
It doesn't want to quit.
Okay, I'm going to the next slide. Just get out of that. It fits the message that the speaker is giving, and we'll see that as we go through it. So basically, I don't know how much you've caught of this, but there was good news and bad news about the location of Philadelphia. The good news was there was a volcano, and which produced a lot of lava, and that kind of soil is very good for growing things in, especially grapes. In fact, their grapes, their wine was so good it competed against Rome's own wine. And the bad news was that volcano produced earthquakes. And when he was talking about the one earthquake that hit, and they had aftershocks for, it was actually 20 years those aftershocks continued. So for 20 years they were constantly faced with this potential for aftershock. And so the city is in constant rebuild. They rebuild it, it fall apart. Rebuild it, fall apart. The city was originally created as a missionary city for the Hellenistic culture. The Greeks put it there to be a doorway to the East to spread the Hellenistic culture, which is Greek culture. And once the Rome took over or conquered Greece, they used it for the same thing. They used it as a doorway to the East in trading and conquering. Okay, so you can see there are buzzwords already associated with this city before we're even talking about Christian influence. And I don't know if you caught it or not, but there was a period when the Caesar, I don't remember his name, gave money to the city to rebuild, and they so appreciated it, they changed the name of the town to Nea Caesarea, which means, new, what's it, new name
City.
of
New
Caesar,
city.
new city of Caesar. So again, they've already experienced a new name. Okay, so when we look at I don't know if I've hit that enough on these other churches, but everything that's in this is not coincidence. It's not quinky-dinky. This is all God's plan. So let's move forward. So go back to verse 7. It says, "And to the angel of the church of Philadelphia write, He who is holy, who is true, who has the key of David, who opens and no one will shut, and who shuts and no one opens, says this." All right, again, we're not getting a clear identification of who this person is. Again, the majority of theologians will tell you that this is Jesus speaking. But there's just, if it is Jesus, then there's new characteristics that we have not seen in him before, and they're adjectives, they're descriptors of Jesus that were typically used for God in the Old Testament. When we think of the Holy One, he who is holy is the same as saying the Holy One. We tend to associate that with God, not with Jesus. Okay, but we would associate the who is true with Jesus. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but by me. He is the truth. He is the way. So we would associate that with Christ. So again, we've got this dichotomy here where we're using descriptors of God and descriptors of Christ to talk about one person, entity, whatever you want to call it, whatever word you want to use for it. So again, I will tell you that if you watch any videos on YouTube on these 7 churches, the majority of them will say that this is Jesus talking. And as I said, there's translations where the whole thing is all red because they're saying Jesus. So I think that it could very well be Jesus. It's just a Jesus that we've never known before. These are just, we've never seen these aspects of Jesus before, so it could be. But it's a kind of assumptive to assume that it is Jesus without thinking about, well, is Jesus more complex than we originally thought? He's not just this. There's more to him than that. All right, so what does holy mean? Well, pure, blameless, and consecrated. And Mark Corella says, Hannahs, cows, and smoke are not holy. Holy cow, holy smoke, holy Hannah. I hadn't heard holy Hannah since I was a kid. I mean, I don't think anybody, I don't think that's even going to be on Instagram unless one of y'all post it. But we've kind of downplayed the term holy. Holy Moses. I mean, I remember Holy Moses too. But it's a word that has power to it, and we've kind of dumbed it down by putting it with cows, Hannahs, Moses, and smoke. And so we don't really get the sense of what that means and how important that title is. The other word is true, and it means in the Greek here, it means reliable and predictable. When we talk about Christ and we talk about God, one of the things that we can know for sure is that they are predictable. They act, they have a specific way in which they act, things that they will do, things that they would not do. That what they say they're going to do, they're going to do. Allah is not that way. Allah is a very unpredictable God. You don't know what he's going to do. So you're constantly trying to find a way to appease it. And that's why when we look at Christianity, we don't have to worry about, well, if I do this, is God going to be mad? Well, if I'm grounded in Scripture like I should be, I know exactly what I'm supposed to do and what I'm not supposed to do. I don't have to wonder about, is God doing this because I didn't brush my teeth this morning or some wacky thing like that. All right? So we've got those two characters, the holiness and the predictability, that we can count on them to be the same today as they were thousands of years ago from the beginning of time. All right? Now, Isaiah 22:15 through 23. This idea, how many knew exactly what was going on when we read the part about the key of David, who opens and no one will shut, and who shuts and no one opens? Everybody got that, right?
Yes.
Okay, I don't need to worry about that. But I'm going to. so if you look at Isaiah, verses 17 through, I don't remember what the reference was again. It was 22, 15 through 23, right? So here's the story. Listen closely. I didn't make it big enough because I didn't want you to worry about reading it. It says, "Behold, the Lord is about to hurl you violently, you strong man, and he's about to grasp you firmly and wrap you up tightly like a ball to be driven into a vast country. There you will die, and there your splendid chariots will be, your shame of your master's house." Okay, verse 19, "I will depose you from your office, and I will pull you down from your position. Then it will come about on that day that I will summon my servant Eliakim, the son of Hilkiah, and I will clothe him with your tunic and tie your sash securely around him. I will hand your authority over to him, and he'll become a father to the inhabitants of Jerusalem and to the house of Judah." And then the key verses here are 22 and 23. "Then I will put the key of the house of David on his shoulder." This is Eliakim. "When he opens, no one will shut. What he shuts, no one will open. I will drive him like a peg in a firm place, and he will become a throne of glory to his father's house." What was happening here was that King Hezekiah, who was of the line of David, was having to get rid of this palace governor because he had done some things he was supposed to do. And so he was giving the position to Hiakim. And Hiakim, the palace governor, functioned, if you go way, way back to Exodus, like Joseph did in Egypt. He had all power, second only to the king. You remember Joseph, thank you. I knew it was a J. Joseph had all this power. He had the power of the Pharaoh, but he wasn't the Pharaoh, right? But if he told you to do something, you did it because he spoke with the power of the Pharaoh. Well, this position was the same thing in the Jewish court. This palace governor, court governor, whatever, he had that power. He spoke for the king. The only one who had more power than him was the king himself. So Hiakim is being given this power, and the key represented, he would wear it on a ring over his shoulder, so everyone knew who he was. And what that meant was he had the power to decide whether you could get to the king or not. That's interesting. The only way you could access to the king was through this guy. Who's that sound like? Jesus. Right. Jesus. And so that's what this was in reference to. Remember, we talked about when John wrote Revelation, he wasn't a Bible scholar. He wasn't a Torah scholar. So he wasn't going to quote, verbatim. He was going to give you little snippets, and then you were going to have to go back and recall the context in which that was pulled out from. And we see that all throughout the New Testament. So this is what he's doing. He's going back to Isaiah and saying that really Hiakim is a foreshadow of Jesus. And so the only way you and I can get to God is through Christ. Okay, so again, this person's identifying themselves as Christ, but yet also as God. So that's what that means. That takes care of some of that wackiness there. Everybody got that? Okay. "I know your deeds. Behold, I have put before you an open door which no one can shut, because you have a little power and have followed my word and have not denied my name." So you've got, I know your deeds. Again, this is the acts. What is it that you're doing? And this is the speaker saying, you can't do anything that I don't know about. I know everything that you're doing and what you're involved in. He says, "I have put before you an open door." All right, now, and which no one can shut. Okay. This is why, this verse here is why the previous verse was put in there. What did the previous verse say? The person who is speaking has the power to open a door that no one else can shut and shut a door that no one else can open. Okay? That's his credentials for saying what he's saying now. I've opened a door for you that no one can shut. The only person who can shut that door is me. So what does that mean for those believers? Well, the church here was really a missionary church. They were reaching out and having an impact in the community. But it's typical, they were being persecuted because of it. And we'll see what's going to happen here in a little bit. So what the speaker is saying is, look, I've opened this door, this opportunity for you to be missionaries to your community. I've put you in a city that allows for the spread of the gospel to the east. Because this city was the entryway into this trading that was going on in this part of Greece and Turkey. Okay, this is none of this is a mistake. None of this is a coincidence of history. They are there because of the impact they're going to have on spreading the gospel to the east. However far that is. You know, some people say that the gospel was preached in India. Missionaries went that far. But they're there for a reason. And the encouragement here is, yes, I understand you're going through persecution. But I have a mission for you that only I can stop. Think about what's going on in India today. They are persecuted unbelievably.
Yes.
And yet the gospel continues. They cannot stop. If persecution doesn't stop the spread of the gospel, it increases it. Mm-hmm. And you would think that people would like, look, if we want this to die, let's just accept it. Because we fight it, that's when it grows. Persecution is what grew. All right. I'm not talking about taking the spiritual aspect out of it and God being in control. But once persecution started in earnest, that was when the explosion in people becoming, and the Gentiles began to come into the church. Was when they saw these believers who were willing to give up their life for their God. They weren't willing to give up their life for their gods. Most of them didn't believe the gods were real. They just, and at this time in history, they were worshiping Caesar. Well, no one believed he was a god. I mean, you said it because you didn't want to lose your head, but they didn't believe it. They didn't believe in these gods. They just kind of went through the process, so just in case, just in case. So they saw these Christian Jews dying for their faith. And that was part of the mission. The missionary call was dying. How many times have we heard, back in the day, you used to have missionary week at church. And all these missionaries would come in, and they would talk about people that went before them and died. Yeah. Or people they had gone with and who had died. But after those deaths, what happened? The people who killed that missionary ended up becoming believers. Okay? So, persecution is a part of being a Christian and a believer. And Jesus even told us, look, don't think that when you accept me, life's going to be a bowl full of cherries. There's going to be a lot of pits in there. Expect it. They persecuted me. They're going to persecute you. Okay? So he's given them this opportunity. And I think there's some discussion about what this, because you have a little power, what that really means. It could mean that this is like God always uses a remnant to further his plan. There's always a remnant that he uses to spread his gospel, his word, to impact the world. It's got the big body, but it's the remnant that he actually uses. When we get further into Revelation, we're going to see there's going to be a remnant left here on earth that he's going to use to proselytize those that are left behind. So it could be that within this church there are people. There is a remnant that is doing what they're supposed to be doing, and God's going to use them to spread the gospel. It could also be that because they're believers, they don't have any power in the local community. They wouldn't have been part of the guilds because they were believers. They wouldn't have worshipped Caesar, so that would have been a problem for them. So it could be that as well. Or it just could be the fact that the realization that it's not you and I who bring people to Christ. It's God through the Holy Spirit that bring people to Christ. Okay? But he enables us. He gives us opportunities. And one of the things that Lori, and this is not me bragging or patting myself on the back. I'm too old. I can't even reach to do that anymore. But, Paul always used to say, not the Apostle Paul, preacher Paul, used to talk about how when they would go to lunch, they would ask the waitress if there was anything they could pray for them for. And I thought, oh my gosh, I just can't, I don't know if I can do that. I don't want to embarrass anybody. So I never did it. That's the answer I always got. If it's too comfortable, man, I'm not gonna do it. But recently, like probably within the last year, for some reason I've gotten more comfortable doing that. And you find that people, first of all, are like, wait, what? You want to pray for me? Yeah. Is there anything I can pray for you for? And we actually, when we were coming back from the mountains, we stopped off at my favorite travel restaurant, Cracker Barrel, and
Yes.
Lori hates it. I shouldn't hate it, but I love it. If I can find a Cracker Barrel on the
Me
road,
too.
I'm stopping.
Yes.
But
for it.
anyway,
Oh, goodness, yes.
we had a young waitress, and she had just come on. She's going to have a long shift, I guess. And so I said, we're getting ready to say the blessing. Is there anything we can pray for you for? And she was just taken aback. And she said, well, just pray that my shift goes okay and that I survive. And I said, okay, and we'll even pray that you get some good tips. And as she turned to walk away, she turned back and she said, thank you. I thought, that's really all it's about.
Yeah,
It's just letting
right.
people know you care about them. And we've had some very interesting people, like, oh, my daughter has, what was the one that, epilepsy, and, they start getting teared up, and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm being pulled into this thing. But those are opportunities that God is giving to us that's natural. It's not me going on the street corner holding a sign saying, you're going to hell if you don't love Jesus, or, that kind of thing. And I'm not necessarily denigrating that, but I always found it difficult to be forced to go out and street witness. I was like, this is just not me. But in life's natural processes, there are plenty of opportunities for us to let people know that we're believers, that we care about them, and that Jesus cares about them. I think those are the times that we miss and that we will regret later on. All right? So it says, they have followed my word and have not denied my name. So there's persecutions going on, and yet they've stayed steadfast. In the face of persecution, they continue to follow Christ. They refuse to reject Christ. Okay? So let me jump to verse 32 here. This is Matthew 10, 26 through 33, but I'm going to just read 32. It says, therefore, anyone who confesses me before people, I will also confess him before my Father who is in heaven. But whoever denies me before people, I will also deny him before my Father who is in heaven. Do not think that I came to bring peace on the earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. Those verses are pretty powerful when you stop and think about it. That it seems pretty clear to me that if I'm a believer and I refuse to confess Christ to other people, if I refuse to talk about him, if I deny him to other people, then Christ is he's going to deny me. And this idea that that we have taken the word love and contorted it to mean something different, and have applied it to Christianity in a way that's not necessarily appropriate all the time. I think it's pretty clear here that Christ is not saying, I didn't come to be tolerant. I came with a sword. This is a black and white issue. This isn't a gray issue. You're either with me or you're against me. There's nothing in between. There's no compromise. And so the church in Philadelphia is not compromising. They are sticking with what the gospel says to do. If we ever have any time when we wonder, what is it God wants me to do? Go back to the Bible. Go to the Bible. Because that's where God speaks. Again, another reason why we need to be in the Word on our own. You can't take Teacher Greg's word for it. You can't take Trent's word for it. You can't take anybody's. You are going to be held responsible for what you do based on the way you live as a Christian. So I would think you would want to read the instruction manual to know how to do it. Okay? And I think that we have gotten so caught up in trying to be PC in the church that we kind of ignore this verse here. And again, the word tolerance has levels of meaning, but the way that it's being applied today is not necessarily what Christ was talking about. Okay? All right. Verse 9, behold, I will make those of the synagogue of Satan who say that they are Jews and are not, but lie. I will make them come and bow down before your feet and make them know that I have loved you. This doesn't sound, it's not as draconian as it may sound. The synagogue of Satan, we really don't know what's meant by that. But since the word synagogue is there, and we talked about how there's a Greek word synagogue, it's very similar to synagogue. It just means the same thing. So it's this idea of a gathering of Satan. It's not that they were necessarily going to a synagogue of Satan. It was just the gathering of people who have that anti-Christ mentality. So who are these people that are in the synagogue of Satan? Well, what does the verse say? Who they are? Who are they?
Jews, but
They're
not.
Jews and are not. Okay? So if we take this on its face value, who would that be? Gentiles. Judaism was not an unacceptable religion. There were many people, many Gentiles, who adopted the Jewish faith. Okay? There were Greeks, Hellenistic Greeks, who were Jews, but they weren't true Jews. Okay? So what they're saying here is that the Gentiles, so they're not really Jews. They're saying they're Jews, but they're really not. Remember we talked about what a true Jew is? It's not a physical, it's the spiritual. And how when we become believers, we're grafted into the vine, the tree. The true Jew is one who, in his spirit, in his heart, worships God. It's not getting circumcised or whatever. Not those things. And so when we become believers, we're grafted into that tree, and we become Jews, spiritual Jews. So everyone in here who's a believer is a spiritual Jew. Okay? And there might be some that are physical. But when we become believers, according to Paul, we become grafted into that vine and become part of the Jewish family. All right? So these are people that are saying they're Jews, but they're really not. It could also be the group, the Judaizers, who Paul was one of those, who were attacking the Christians because they were making, remember, we talked about how when Christianity first began, a lot of people thought this was just a branch of Judaism, that it wasn't a separate group. And so there would be Judaizers like Peter was. Peter wanted all of the Gentiles who became believers to actually become physically Jewish. And Paul, they had that big argument. No, that's not necessary. And that's when he talked about we're grafted in spiritually. So that could be also what's going on here. But whatever it is, they're attacking these believers, these Jewish believers, and on a religious level. They're persecuting it. And what the speaker says, I will make them come and bow down. Now this isn't like they're going to come and worship at the feet of these Christians, these believers. What it means is that they will sit in their presence, hear what they have to say, and will become believers. So this is the door that's being opened. The opportunity to take these people who are not believers to become believers. And what's going to sell them on being a believer? I have loved you. God's love is, the message of God's love is what's going to convert them. Okay? Makes sense? All right, so because you have kept my word of perseverance, I will also keep you from the hour of testing, that hour which is about to come upon the whole world to test those who live on the earth. All right, so they've maintained, the speaker says, my word of perseverance is this patience. Understanding that in the midst of persecution, God's plan will work itself out. And they're enduring it and continuing to serve him during that period. okay, of persecution. And he says, I will keep you from the hour of the testing. So, is this a specific time of testing? Some would say that the hour of the testing is tribulation. And so this is a verse that is used by pre-tribbers to support their idea that believers will be raptured before the tribulation period, because the hour of the testing. The problem with that is that the word for testing here is not the word that's used for tribulation later on. It's a different Greek word. And it simply means a time of trial. Not, there's never the term capital T, the tribulation, anywhere in Revelation. Okay? So it could mean that. It could mean that they're going to be spared, that this group that they would be spared from that period of the tribulation. It could also mean that there's going to be coming a period of judgment that God will protect them from while they're doing their ministry. And when they use the term about to come, that's in many versions, that's the word imminent. And what that just means is that they didn't expect it to happen today. They just knew it was coming. It was coming. And to be prepared for this idea, we don't know when Grandma and Grandpa are going to get here, but we need to be ready. The house needs to be clean. Y'all need to be dressed and looking nice. Y'all need to be wet, but we don't know when they're coming. But we're going to be ready when they do get here. That's the same idea here. Except it's Jesus instead of Grandma and Grandpa. Okay? All right, so I'm going to have to stop there because we got to go. Any questions or comment? Go ahead. Any questions or comments?